Hello, I'm Denton Davidson, senior editor for Gold Derby, and I'm with Naomie Harris, who plays Justin Falls in Showtime's new sci-fi series, The Man Who Fell to Earth. Naomie, this is a continuation of the 1976 film starring David Bowie, but it's not a remake. How familiar were you with that original film before you signed on for this role, and what excited you most about the storyline?
Yeah, so it's actually there's a 45-year gap between the original and this one. So and it's very different. It's completely different characters. Like my character Justin wasn't in the original, so they're very, very different takes on this material. But obviously lots of the same themes and some of the same characters. But I was not familiar at all with The Man Who Fell to Earth before signing on to do this project. So I had to educate myself about it and go back and watch the movie, which I have to say, the movie is a little impenetrable. I think it really is for proper movie buffs. But I was blown away by David Bowie's performance. That was one of the big takeaways for me. I was just like, I cannot believe that this is this man's first ever, movie debut, and it's such a flawless performance. It was absolutely incredible. But what drew me to the material was that I started reading it. It's, for me, whenever I choose a project, it's all about the emotional connection. It's not an intellectual choice. I'm not kind of like, oh, this would be a good move for my career. I just feel like, does it touch me? Does it move me? Does it connect with me on some level? And is it a story that I think is going to connect with other people? And it was definitely that. It was a real page turner. I absolutely loved it. I got emotionally involved, and also I thought it had some amazing themes, which are so relevant to today.
And then how do you prepare for that type of role? Because, Justin has a lot of pain in her life. There's a lot of skepticism about Faraday and what he wants from her, as anyone would have. Someone comes in and says, I need you. You're the only person. She has no idea who he is. So, what's the most important part of her for you to connect to breathe life into this character?
Well, for me, Justin was kind of an easy connect in the sense that she reminded me so much of my own mother.
Okay.
So for me, it was really about paying homage to my mum through this role, because I saw Justin as this woman who has the weight of the world on her shoulders. She has a sick father that she's got to take care of. She's a single parent to her child. She's carrying all this guilt about things that we discover later on in the series. And she's trying to make ends meet and deal with the health service in the States, and trying to get medication for her father when she can't afford it, and all of these kind of things, and just kind of struggling to survive. And in that struggle, she completely loses her sense of self, and her entire life becomes about being of service to others. And I think so many women end up in that position. And I really wanted to respect their struggle and to highlight their struggle, and to do the best possible job I could do to really demonstrate how difficult that kind of life is, and how beautiful it is then when someone like Faraday comes along to remind Justin about who she is, who she really is, and how magnificent she is, and to reconnect her with her passions and her joy.
What is it like for you stepping into a sci-fi project? I read one of your earliest projects was called The Tomorrow People when you were a kid, and that was like a children's sci-fi show. So first of all, could you tell us about that experience, and then what it's like to be now back in a sci-fi role where there's so many fans? I got lucky enough to go to a premiere of this series, and Sir Patrick Stewart was even there. So there's so many fans of the genre.
Yeah. So I did The Tomorrow People when I think I was about 15 years old.
Okay.
So really, really long time ago now. And that was what I would consider to be your traditional, typical kind of sci-fi TV show, with the blue flashing lights, and it was just all the kind of traditional things you'd expect of sci-fi. I would say The Man Who Fell to Earth is a radical departure from that kind of sci-fi. It's sci-fi adjacent in a way, because it's not focusing on that. You know, it's not focusing on the sci-fi elements. That is just part of the story, and then there's a whole other breadth of, you know, all these other things that constitute The Man Who Fell to Earth. So it's very different from The Tomorrow People. But I love the themes of, you know, I think it is fascinating to ask ourselves, where are we going to be in the future? You know, where are we heading? What are we going to be like? What is life like? I think everybody's fascinated by those questions. So I think that's why these dramas really appeal to people.
Yeah. Or what place do we hold in the universe?
Mm.
When you're, so even just the visual effects, I'm curious about what it's like as an actor. You're like screaming in a car in a sand tornado that's about to lift you into, you know, who knows where. What is that like for you as an actor when you're sort of going toe to toe with is it like a green screen, or what's the difference between doing that and with an actor? Is it more difficult or easier, or what's the dynamic?
I mean, that's a really interesting question, actually. I think they have different challenges, I
Yeah.
think is the truth of it, because when you're acting against a green screen, it's, you just have to rely on your imagination. You know, it's all about, you know, there's nothing real happening. You know, there's absolutely nothing to play off except your imagination. But that's what, you know, that's how I rehearse in my room. There's nothing to play off, right? So I'm used to doing that. And even as a kid, I remember spending hours just imagining like myself chased by monsters, or horrible things happening, or happy things happening. You know, that was, so I'm used to delving into my imagination, and my imagination luckily is incredibly rich. So I don't actually mind those things. And it's a wonderful thing from being in this profession so long. I don't really feel self-conscious either. So I just kind of throw myself into them, get on with them, and enjoy it. And then when you're acting with another performer, I think for me, in a way, I would say it's even harder, because I feel a responsibility to give the other performer what they need. So I'm not just conscious of what I'm doing, but I'm really like, okay, have I delivered this in a way that the other person can pick this up and go and you know, do what they need to do with their next line? And am I giving them enough? Or, you know, but all those kind of concerns when you're working with green screen disappear, and you just get to focus on yourself and have a great time. So actually I like green screen.
Oh, it's almost like being in a team sport or an individual sport in
Yeah,
some sort of ways.
yeah.
Um, so as I mentioned, I had the opportunity to go to a screening, and the creators of the show were there. Jenny Lumet had mentioned that Justin, your character, was one of the first characters they developed, and it was imperative that she be a woman of color, because you can make the argument that women of color are the most endangered species on our planet and the most vulnerable. Is that a perspective that, you know, they told you about this role? Were you aware of that going in? And I'm wondering, you know, is that something on your shoulders that you carry? Like, is that a weight on your shoulders when you're representing something that feels that sort of big of a statement?
Yeah, I mean, it wasn't actually something, it's so fascinating, this process of when, once you've created something and then you start, you know, publicizing it to the world, and you hear other people's takes on it, and you know, how the creators thought about the project and thought about your character, because there's a lot of things like that which I didn't know anything about going into it. And in a way, I'm so glad, because I didn't feel like, oh my God, there's the weight of the world on my shoulders. What I felt was that it was the weight of my mum. You know, I really wanted to honor her through this role, but I wanted to honor women like her, but I didn't feel like I was honoring and holding on my shoulders every Black woman out there. And so in some respects, you know, I look back and now, and I think what an honor to be able to do that. But I think I'm glad I didn't know that that's how Jenny saw it before I signed on to it.
And there's moments where race isn't mentioned, but it's felt. There's something about seeing Chiwetel, you know, naked with a gun pointed at him, and then the scenes where the police are behind Justin as she's driving. I think what makes it so interesting is that you know, he's from another planet. She's not saying like, this is what it's like to be Black, but you can feel it happening. So just the fact that it's not even stated, but any viewer can feel it. I mean, that's just the truth coming through the screen. So what was that like filming those scenes?
Yeah, I mean that, it added a whole other dimension to scenes like that. There's also this other wonderful scene where I'm with Chiwetel and in the diner,
Yes.
and he like knocks a drink onto the floor, and there are cops sat at the other table, and that should be just a simple thing, like I knocked a cup on the floor, but for Justin, she knows that there's a huge amount of weight behind that, and a huge amount of danger attached to doing something as simple as that. So she's actually absolutely terrified, but it's a prime example of their kind of relationship, where she's constantly having to educate this man. She obviously doesn't realize in the beginning that he's an alien, but she's having to educate him about the nuances and about the social structure, and that because he's completely oblivious, he knows none of that. And so through her teaching him, we come to recognize and see how society operates, and racism is sadly a huge factor in our society.
Right. Can you talk about working with Chiwetel Ejiofor, who plays Faraday, and how your styles differ, complement each other? Because you have great chemistry on screen, so I'm just curious to know, what's he like to partner with on set?
So Chiwetel and I work in completely different ways. Like
Okay.
they couldn't be more different. So Chiwetel is incredibly cerebral. So he likes to dissect everything in the script and work with the director and talk about it a lot and rehearse a lot. I'm completely different because I come to a script from the point of feelings. Maybe it's the difference between men and women, I don't know, but I'm all about like, how does this feel? What does my character feel like? I am not interested in rehearsals at all, because I don't want to know what's going to happen. I want to be surprised. I want to be centered in the moment, and I want whatever plays out to play out. I don't want to, rehearse something and then have a rigid view about, okay, so on this line, Chiwetel does X, and on that line, I do this, or what have you. I just want to find it in the moment and be free as possible. So we come from like completely different ways of working, and I'm so grateful to Alex, because Alex could have said, hey, look, I like to rehearse, because I know that Alex does like to rehearse. And he could have said, look, I like to rehearse, so that's what we're going to do. But instead he said, I've seen your work. I trust you. I know that you know how to get to where you need to get to. So if that's your process and you don't want to rehearse, that's fine. So I'll just go ahead and rehearse with Chiwetel. And that's what we did. And then we came together, in the moment, in those scenes, and created what we created. And it actually really worked, I think, because it's like we're literally coming from two different planets. And we literally are,
Yeah.
And Chiwetel is supposed to be, his character Faraday is supposed to be all head and all mission driven, and I am supposed to be all centered in the moment and working out like, what the hell is going on with this guy? He doesn't seem to make any sense. And she's not a cerebral person in those moments, in the sense that if she were, her head would tell her, don't pick a crazy man off the street and take him on a journey in your car. She would, but because her heart, she's centered in her heart, she does those things. So I think it works really brilliantly, actually, in the show, that we do have very different ways of working.
And what about Clark Peters, who plays your father? I mean, he's so great. Josiah Falls. What is he like?
Oh my gosh, do you know that he's listed in my phone as dad? Like
Uh,
literally, I still call him dad. Like, I love that man so much. He is such a beautiful, beautiful soul. And he's just so playful. That's one of the things that I really love about him. He's completely free. He's like a kid. He really is like a kid. And he constantly makes everything fun, and he makes you laugh, and he has no ego. Oh my gosh, I just well up when I think about him. I saw him recently in New York when we had our premiere, and I was just like, Dad! I was just so happy to see him. He's so special. Yeah. And a phenomenal, phenomenal actor. And you see it, you know, his heart, his soul just, you know, exudes out of the screen.
And, you know, Gold Derby, we talk about awards a lot. And one of your great roles, of course, was in Moonlight. You received an Oscar nomination for that. The ensemble, by the way, won the Gold Derby Award for Best Ensemble, I'm going to add. But so I'm curious about, if you look back now that there's, you know, some time away from that, what do you remember from that night? Whether it's, you know, just being in the room, was it, you know, a certain movie star that you ran into, you're like, oh my God, or a party afterwards? What was the craziest or most fun memory about that time period for you?
The whole period? The whole
Yeah.
award period, or just the Oscars?
Whatever you think is the most interesting.
Oh my gosh. God, that's so hard. I think maybe she's not a movie star, but for me, it was running into Naomi Campbell on the red carpet at the Golden
Okay.
Globe, and her being like, Naomi, and me being like, Naomi knows me, little old Naomi. Oh my gosh. And then her coming and embracing my mom and, you know, giving us a hug and chatting to us. I was like, oh my gosh, I was starstruck by Naomi Campbell. I mean, she just, you know, she's just such an icon. So it was incredible meeting her. That was one of my highlights. But there were many, you know, it was such an extraordinary journey. And I was just, that film is so special because, you know, it was made for a tiny, tiny budget. No one had the expectation that it would do what it did and win Best Picture at the Oscar. I mean,
and what an awkward moment for that as well. Like,
yes,
what was that
I
like to be in
definitely
the room?
remember that moment. That's for sure.
What was your reaction for that? Because that wasn't like you being called up, but it was your movie. I mean, that had
Yeah.
to be very uncomfortable.
Well, what it was just I was confused. I was like, is this a joke? And when they said that we had won, I was like, I just stayed in my seats because I thought they're going to say, no, we're wrong. It's La La Land. And so I just stayed there, and I'm just so grateful. One of our producers actually just came and like dragged me onto the stage. Otherwise, I would be left in my seat. I'd be the only one of the cast members who didn't go up. But yeah, I think, you know, it definitely goes down as one of like the most memorable moments in Oscar history, and how fantastic to have participated in one of those moments.
Yeah, without a doubt. Naomi, it's such a pleasure to speak with you. The Man Who Fell to Earth is on Showtime. Best of luck to you and the entire cast at this year's Emmys. To our viewers watching, head over to goldderby.com, make your Emmy predictions, and check out more interviews with some of the year's top contenders. Naomi, thanks again for chatting with Gold Derby today.
Thank you for having me. I'm so grateful.